Hello and welcome to this week's watercolour lesson. This time we're going to be talking about glazing. Now, glazing or layering is basically a wash of colour that can be built up to make depth of tone in lots of thin layers, or used to change the colour and consequently the mood of your work by painting a veil of translucent colour over the whole of your picture. Now I'm going to demonstrate that in this exercise, which you'll also find very useful for brush control and indeed control of your impatience, because there's going to be an awful lot of waiting for paint to dry here. We need to mix plenty of colour, and by that I mean all the paint you're going to use to actually complete the whole picture, as we want to have the same proportion of dilution and indeed pigment, so we can be consistent in our layers with each glaze. This time I've used ultramarine and Payne's grey because I want to get a really dark at the bottom, almost black. You can do this with any colour, but if you imagine using something like a yellow, it could only be as dark as the most saturated version of that colour, so you wouldn't obviously be able to get a very dark with something like a yellow or red. So choose a blue, and then you can go almost from the lightest dilution of the blue to almost black. Now I've already painted one glaze, and let's have a go at doing another. We want to wet up first, and what we're going to do is just sort of quite random sort of mountains, so a bit of a wobbly line, and then wet all the way down to the bottom of the paper. I've just slightly put a little tiny bit of tint in here so you can see where everything's going, and you can see how much water we need to use. Right, now you need to wait for it just so it's got a very slight shine on it. You certainly don't want puddles. And then we can apply our glaze, so a very, very thin glaze, almost no colour at all, and that will be our first glaze. Obviously it helps to have your picture on an angle, because then everything will run downwards. It should run very fast. And leave it to dry. Right, wash number 2. So I think we'll have some mountains, sort of, maybe a bit more pointed than that. Right, and this is the water going down to the bottom. Right, just give it a minute and let it, so it's not too wet. And let's put the next wash on. Right, a bit of a jump here, but you can see first layer, second layer, third layer, fourth layer, fifth. We're going to do one more so we can see if we can get it really, really very dark. I'm just cleaning my brush out here. I put some clean water here, and you can see I've immediately dirtied it, but it doesn't matter too much because this layer is going to be as dark as we can make it. So we'll put another wobbly line here to be these mountains that now are not quite so distant. And it's very important here, you can see that I'm wetting up, but I'm not scrubbing, because as long as the actual layers of watercolour are properly dry, you can re-wet it up, you can put a layer of water over the top and it'll be absolutely fine. It won't dislodge the colour at all, as long as you're fairly light and you're not scrubbing. So just down to the bottom here. And don't forget to check for any, I can see there's a hole here that I've missed, and here, and just here. Right, you can see I've been really busy here. So this is the French Ultramarine and Payne's Grey exercise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers, and they seem to be sitting really quite flat, so that's quite successful. I've done another 2 here. This one is the quinacridone rose, and it's interesting as a pigment. It's at its most beautiful when dilute here, and the darker, more saturated versions of itself are less satisfying. This one's phthalo blue, and with both of these pigments I didn't actually wet the paper first, except for the very initial wash, and they seem to lie quite flat and work fairly well, but it's good quality paper, and that will make a huge difference. So it's a nice little exercise to show how building up layers can very subtly adjust the tonal depth of your picture. I'll put a link so you can add some silhouettes to make these exercises into something more figurative, and I'll show you my version at the end. I just wanted to tell you a little bit now about how to use glazing to adjust the warmth of a picture, or essentially change the mood. This is one of my pictures which I painted directly, and by that I mean putting colour specifically where I wanted it on the paper. But I wasn't getting enough of a glow, and I really wanted to see that magical light you get with sun on water. So I glazed it with quinacridone gold a number of times, and the idea is to get that effect when the sun comes out and just bathes the whole scene in a sort of golden light. So basically, if you've got a picture here and you're dissatisfied with the overall mood, you want to just change the colour bias a little bit, what we can do is glaze it, and we're going to have a go with this. I've got a mixture here of gamboge, which is a better yellow than cadmium, because cadmium yellow is a little bit opaque for what we want to do here, and I put a little bit of Peril Scarlet in it to make a sort of orange, and this mixture is very thin because it's almost like water, but it's tinted. And what we're going to do here is take a nice big brush. We won't wet it first because we want it to be just like a veil of colour. And can you see we're glazing directly over the top, nice and wet, and if we're very lucky we won't have much in the way of stripes. And if you have a look here, as we go over these other tonal values, they'll just show through. Can you see this? What we don't want to do is scrub. If we do any scrubbing, we'll wake up what's underneath, and we don't want to do that. I think could take it down to, if you feel for a moment that the painting underneath is coming loose, stop and clean your brush and just wait a little while. Let's see what happens if we place this on. There's a wee bit heavy, so I'm that. That's a really interesting subtle effect. I like that. Now I've got another picture here. In fact, you can practice on, find all your old bits and pieces, the pictures that you don't like or have given up on. This is a picture I did of, or I started doing, of Lantoni. We'll just wait for this to dry and then I'll set this up and show you this with a glaze on it. Right, I've got a picture here. I wasn't happy with it on so many levels, but I never throw my old pictures away because they're very, very useful to practice things on. And this was supposed to be a picture of Lantoni. And so what I can do for you now is show you how we might be able to save it by glazing it. So we've got this rather moody sort of sky. And let's see if we can pink it up a bit and make it a little bit more dramatic. I've already done one glaze. Let me just show you another one. This is Permanent Rose, which is a nice translucent colour. Can you see how pink that is? It goes right over the top of everything that you've done before. Don't let it pool in colours. This is the bit where it's more cloudy. And you get a feel for it once a picture is very dry. It might be feeling drier in some areas than others. But as I said before, be very careful if you feel that you're starting to remove the paint that's underneath. See if we can get that pinky glow down there on the green. What do you think? So here we are. This lesson we've used glazes to build up tone and glazes to change colour and mood. These are the quinacridone rose and the phthalo blue versions that I did for you, and I've changed them from being like a sort of abstract exercise into something more figurative by adding silhouettes. It seems to me they'd make really lovely Christmas cards actually, and it's never too early to start thinking about doing that, is it really? I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll be back next week. Bye.